Screw up number 1. Ferruccio Lamborghini was born into a family who farmed grapes for a living. His mechanical knowledge and interests eventually led him to enter the business of making tractors. During World War II, most of Italy's industrial output would be related to war needs, thus neglecting other needs like agricultural equipment. This is why after the war, his tractor manufacturing business became very lucrative. So the business was doing pretty well for Ferruccio, and after some years he even started other companies, and so he buys a Ferrari as to flex on everyone with his tractor wealth. After owning it for some time, he then noticed that it had an inferior clutch that would always break. He brings up the complaint all the way to the owner, Enzo Ferrari, and argued to him that tractors had better clutches than Ferrari cars. Enzo Ferrari shrugged off the complaint, thinking that a mere farmer had nothing against the prestige of Ferrari cars. This is what pushed Ferruccio Lamborghini to enter the business of luxury cars, just out of spite. So because of his pride, Enzo Ferrari created one of his main competitors. Screw up number 2. On the morning of December 6, 1917, the French cargo ship Mont Blanc was carrying munitions from New York through Halifax, ultimately to go to Bordeaux, France. Meanwhile, the Norwegian SS Imo was speeding through Halifax harbor because it had been delayed earlier in the day, and its captain was too impatient to go their advised speed. The Imo realized that they screwed up, though, when it was clear that they were about to have a head-on collision with the Mont Blanc, so both ships killed their engines. But Mont Blanc did not engage its force stop because, well, it's full of very sensitive bombs. But it looked like both ships were going to make it out alright, as they were able to steer parallel to each other. But then the captain of the Imo, and no one actually knows why, decided to hit the reverse, and then its head hit into the Mont Blanc, knocking over several barrels of benzol on board, which then ignited and, well, the resulting explosion released the same energy as 2.9 kilotons of TNT, wiping out several neighborhoods and killing over 2,000. This is why the name of the Imo is used right before anyone is about to say something really stupid. Screw up number 3. Stalin ignoring all intel that said the Nazis were planning an invasion. The Soviets knew everything about Operation Barbarossa. They knew the exact date and time, troop numbers and positions, etc. Stalin himself had no less than 84 different sources tell him that Hitler was planning an invasion, and he just ignored that and went on with purging his officer corps. Yeah, that cost millions of lives. Screw up number 4. In the middle of the 1800s, a South African Xhosa woman, known Kwayus, prophesies that her tribe would receive divine powers if they obeyed the spirits of her ancestors by killing all of their cattle and destroying all their crops. And everyone just went along with this. And then after realizing that they had destroyed their only food sources, around 78,000 Xhosa tribe members starved due to the resulting famine. Screw up number 5. Operation Cottage was an operation by US and Canadian forces planned to retake the Aleutian island of Kiska in 1943, which had been captured by Japanese forces a year prior. Now, the Americans and Canadians were expecting heavy resistance, as that was what was expected of the Pacific Front. Problem was, the Japanese evacuated the island 2 weeks prior to the operation, but the Allied forces never realized this. So on August 15th, US and Canadian forces landed on opposite shores of Kiska. But then, when they met up, they mistook each other for the Japanese and fired on each other, resulting in the deaths of 32 soldiers. Screw up number 6. In the 12th century, a monk made a prayer book. Paper was scarce in those days, so instead of shelling out for brand new paper, the monk pulled out an old manuscript off the shelf and just wrote it using that. He scraped off the ink and set off writing his book. Later analysis has shown that the worthless manuscript that he practically destroyed was actually a book called The Method by Archimedes. The book laid out the basics of calculus and physics more than 1500 years before Newton and Leibniz. So yeah, we could have flying cars now if that guy had not written over the book. Screw up number 7. So in the year 1847, this idiot named Alexander Buchanan released a bunch of rabbits onto his estate because he was bored and wanted to hunt them for sport. But the problem was, this was on Australia, and there were no native rabbits there, and I guess no one gave him the birds and the bees, but especially the rabbits talk. So the population of rabbits exploded, and even today they are considered the biggest factor for species loss in Australia. Screw up number 8, Jared Ratner's joke. He had turned his family's chain jeweler business into a company valued at 840 million plus pounds, this being in 1990, and was the largest retailer of jewelry in the world. During a speech for the Institute of Directors, he makes this joke about his products.
We even sell a pair of earrings for under £1, gold earrings as well. And some people say, well, that's cheaper than a prawn sandwich from Marks and Spencer's. But I have to say, the sandwich will probably last longer than the earrings.
This lowered the valuation of the group to around 32 million a year later, which practically killed their business in the UK. Special thanks to patrons Skylar Weston, Ben Hughes, Zy Mandez,